First and foremost, I want to emphasize to all those serving in our National Guard. Vermonters know you serve with pride and integrity, that you've made and continue to make tremendous sacrifices, putting your state and country before self time and time again. I want you to know you have my respect, my gratitude for your service, and I've seen firsthand how hard you train to be the very best and how much you value honor and integrity. As we've seen throughout time, in many areas and in many organizations, there will be instances of poor judgment, mistakes made, and an occasional bad apple. But individual situations such as these are the exception, not the rule. They do not represent the Vermont National Guard as a whole, or reflect the vast majority of members and leadership who serve with honor. With the questions raised in recent weeks, however, I believe it's important to verify that current practice upholds the legal and ethical standards expected of our Guard. It's an opportunity for the Guard to communicate and describe these standards and processes to the public, as well as its commitment to holding everyone, regardless of rank, relationship, or role, fully accountable. I know how important faith and trust is to this institution, and I appreciate General Cray's leadership in this area and his continued commitment to this work. I also appreciate his willingness to speak with you today. I understand that without being able to discuss specific personnel matters, it's difficult to address all your questions and concerns. But it was important for both of us that we review all the Guard's commitment to ensuring the safety of all its members, its adherence to defined systems of reporting, discipline, victim advocacy, and more importantly, their commitment to accountability and a culture that puts integrity, excellence, and service above all else. I want to be very clear. My faith and confidence in the women and men of the Vermont National Guard is unwavering, and I believe they have followed their systems. And I believe that they've followed the systems of our federal partners as well for adjudicating difficult personnel matters. But as with anything, there is always an opportunity to do better. And I know General Cray and the Guard understands this as well. At this point, I'll turn it over to General Cray.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Governor Scott, for your continued support of your Vermont National Guard. It means a lot to the Vermont National Guard members and their families that you're standing here with us. First, I want to express how proud I am to be serving as Vermont's Adjutant General. I have served this state and nation for nearly 34 years, and it's been an honor and a privilege to lead our airmen and soldiers. Our women and men of the Vermont National Guard have volunteered to serve this country and made great sacrifices to protect the freedoms we enjoy each and every day. There's a reason that military service members are considered one of the most respected professions in the United States. Our fellow citizens expect and deserve the very best of our country, and that we will protect their sons and daughters with whom they have entrusted us with their care. To that point, last week was arguably one of the toughest weeks I've experienced as a service member. And to be clear, I vehemently disagree with and dispute the negative characterization of our members and our culture in recent media coverage. I believe that through adversity, we will continue to grow and improve our organization. While we as an organization have made significant progress on our response capabilities, we are still battling the societal issues of sexism and harassment. The Vermont National Guard is committed to ensuring those who have the personal courage to report harmful bias, acts of discrimination, or crimes of sexual assault are validated, and those responsible will be held accountable. I fully acknowledge that we are not a perfect organization, but I and the leadership are committed to improving our culture of dignity and respect. Although privacy protections prevent me from speaking about specific details, I can say that the cases and individuals that were identified in the articles were investigated, reviewed, and adjudicated. The individuals were all granted an appeal process and reviewed at multiple levels in and outside of the Vermont National Guard. And in the end, the cases were handled correctly, professionally, and appropriate action was taken. Make no mistake that while I am the Adjutant General, this organization will continue to appropriately investigate and take action on all reported offenses. If current or former employees feel they've been harassed or victimized in any way, my door is always open to you. Since my tenure began in 2013, we have taken many steps to improve our organizational culture. It was a cornerstone in my pledge to the Vermont Legislature. The Vermont National Guard has several programs and policies in place to focus on organizational excellence and culture. Our EO, or Equal Opportunity Program, the SAPR, or Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Program, the Cultural Transformation Task Force, the Military Women's Program, and our reporting requirements to the Vermont Legislature. The Equal Opportunity Program promotes the full realization of equal opportunity in employment for all persons, and to identify and eliminate discriminatory practices and policies to include sexual harassment. The SAPR program is responsible for executing a proactive and comprehensive program designed to educate, advocate, and collaborate in order to respond to and stop sexual assault and its harmful effects that impact our members. We have 2 full-time state-level program managers, 1 full-time Air National Guard program manager, as well as 4 sexual assault response coordinators and 33 unit victim advocates. All of them are trained and certified through the National Organization of Victim Advocacy. Our SAPR program is fully integrated into our civilian networks throughout the state of Vermont for community engagement. We are members of the Chittenden County Sexual Assault Domestic Violence Task Force, and our own sexual assault response coordinator, Mr. Scott Detweiler, is the co-chair. We're members of the Intercollegiate Violence Council. We're members of the Vermont Victim Assistance Academy, and we are networked with all Vermont sexual and domestic violence programs across the state. From these EO and SAPR programs, I created the Cultural Transformation Task Force in 2013 to provide a more focused response to culture change. And our end state for the task force was and continues to be: 1, improve climate and overall response to issues with regard to sexual harassment, sexual assault, and violence in the workplace. 2, a successful transition of women into combat assignments in the 86th Brigade Combat Team. 3, increased retention rates in all categories with special emphasis on women and minorities. 4, increased representation of women and minorities in non-traditional roles and in leadership positions. And from the task force was born the Vermont National Guard Military Women's Program. This program has continued to integrate trainings on gender diversity and building platforms to discuss strategies to combat sexism. We implemented the Lean In Circle concept. These facilitated conversations focus on the challenges of women in the military. Men and women both participate in these facilitated groups and are experiencing peer-to-peer support regarding countermeasures to sexism. Since 2013, Vermont statute requires the Vermont National Guard to report annually on sexually based offenses, and we have provided the legislative body a comprehensive picture of the work we have done and what we continue to do regarding the prevention of sex-based offenses and care for survivors. The following facts are provided to clarify the data released as part of last week's reporting series. From 2013 to 2017, 33 reports of sexual assault were received. Of the 33 reports, 14 were identified Vermont National Guard service members as the alleged offender. 19 of the 33 cases were for incidents prior to 2013, which suggests that members now have greater confidence in the system to come forward and that they will be treated fairly with advocacy they deserve. This increased reporting is in line with the increase in national reporting. Our programs have been recognized with numerous awards, to include the 2016 National Guard Bureau Excellence in Diversity Award And in 2017, the Army Individual Award to the State Equal Employment Manager. And I'm proud of the progress we have made, but like every institution, we should always be working to improve in this area. And that's why I've ordered the following action steps. 1, to initiate a policy to increase transparency and disclosure of cases and the disposition of them. 2, to shift the format of compliance-based sexual harassment training to increase direct leadership engagement on prevention efforts. And 3, to work with the Vermont legislature to identify how we can monitor and track the progress on these 2 action items as part of our annual reporting process. I also want to ensure survivors who come to us know that we will protect their information. An unfortunate and disheartening byproduct of the series is that the survivors had their personal information shared with the press and they were contacted directly. The program managers and advocates we have today are credentialed and trained by civilian organizations to collect and to protect privacy information. And I have the highest level of trust and confidence that our program managers and advocates will safeguard your personal information. And while I accept that we have an opportunity to reflect and improve, I stand by the integrity of our processes and the work to ensure all members of the Vermont National Guard have equal opportunity for advancement, feel safe in the workplace, and know everyone who is found to have broken the rules is held accountable. Survivor choice is a cornerstone of our programs, including a member's decision to make a confidential report, which we will continue to protect. In closing, I reiterate that serving as the Vermont Adjutant General has been a privilege. I literally grew up in this organization and will hold my head high when I retire in March. My civilian employer has fully expected me to return to work after my 3rd term as Adjutant General. It will be hard to leave something that has been a part of my life for nearly 34 years. But I know that the women and men of the Vermont National Guard and the military department will continue to lead the way for Vermont. And with that, I will take questions.
Can you describe those 2 action steps that you're taking and sort of what shortcomings they're meant to address?
Yes. Let me get back to it. So the first action step was to initiate a policy to increase transparency and disclosure in cases and disposition of them. So the goal there is to come up with a policy of how we can let the organization know that we do have incidents that happen without releasing any personal information, and then to follow up with a disposition of that case.
Major General, you mentioned in your comments early on that you vehemently disagreed with the image that was portrayed in the series of articles. Were there any factual errors in those articles from your perspective?
So the cases that were described in the series of articles, again, a lot of privacy information was included. And so what I can say is that the individuals that were mentioned in the articles, that there was a full investigation, due process, full investigation, adjudication, that there was an appeal process afforded, and that appropriate action was taken.
I think the question was whether there were factual errors in the reporting. Were there factual errors in the reporting, or do you believe the reporting was accurate?
So I mentioned that I thought that the reporting of the number of cases, sexual assault cases, was inaccurate, and I did correct the record in the opening statement.
Was that the only thing that was inaccurate in the series of stories?
The ones that I could, that I wanted to highlight, yes, that's the only ones.
But just to be clear, everything else is accurate in the story?
So the portrayal of the incidents is, that's the side of the reporter. What I'm saying is that in every case, the individual was held, that there was a due process and that they were held accountable.
Well, I could be misunderstanding you. It sounds like you object to the tone of the stories, right? But I think what we're trying to get to is whether you disagree with the underlying facts. And other than the one that you just specified, are there any other facts that the Guard disagrees with or thinks are not factual?
No, I would agree with you. I disagree with the tone and the characterization of the culture in the National Guard.
But not the actual underlying facts.
And I'm trying to think of all of the series of articles and the facts, but the ones that I wanted to highlight were the ones that I mentioned in my statement.
If there are, I realize it's a long series, there are many stories, there are a lot of facts in there. If there are specific facts that you think are not facts, can you commit to letting us know, to providing that information to the press so that we can make sure that we're telling these stories factually?
Absolutely.
Okay, when can you do that? Soon? When can you?
So we would have to review each article separately with our JAG and personnel that would allow us to go through and make sure that we're, because again, a lot of these cases involve privacy issues that we are bound by regulation not to disclose.
But you're committing to do that review, it sounds like.
We will look at that.
Yeah, have there been any criminal charges filed in association with these incidents?
So the Vermont National Guard does not have jurisdiction in any criminal matters. So all of our actions that we take after due process is administrative only. And that any of the cases that were referred to local law enforcement or the Office of Complex Investigations would have been reviewed for any type of criminal misconduct.
General Cray, were you summoned this week to the National Guard Bureau in Washington to discuss some of these issues? This
I
week
was-
or last?
I was not summoned to the National Guard Bureau to discuss the issues that we're talking about today.
Were you summoned to the National Guard Bureau?
I went to the National Guard Bureau on Monday night and Tuesday for a strategic planning meeting that had been scheduled for months.
Did any of these matters come up while you were there?
Not while I was there, no.
They've come up in another way? Can you tell us how they've come up?
So the National Guard Bureau, obviously, the Public Affairs Department of the National Guard Bureau reads the articles as we have and we're aware of the stories, and then we were in contact with them to make sure that they fully understood where we were with the Vermont National Guard on these issues.
Has the Army National Guard contacted you about the delayed discharges and the practices of the Vermont National Guard that some told us were leading to higher staffing, lower morale, things like this?
The Vermont Army National Guard has not contacted us on the story of the held discharges. Through a process, a continuous improvement process, we looked at the process of discharging, and we were able to make some efficient changes to that over the last couple of years, and now we're a leader in the nation on that metric.
Did anyone in the Guard leadership knowingly delay discharges to prop up your numbers?
No one in the Guard leadership knowingly held anyone through. Again, we looked at the process, discovered inefficiencies in the process, and made changes to the process.
Do you disagree with the numbers that were reported in VT Digger from 2012 to 2017 on those numbers?
I did not see the numbers, so I'd have to go back and review, as was asked previously, if that fact is incorrect.
Governor Scott, since General Cray is leaving his post in a couple months, short months, what are your expectations on his eventual replacement? And what will you tell that person about how you hope he or she will address these issues, which won't be fixed in 3 months?
Yeah, well, I'm very proud of the work that General Cray has done and served our state and our country well over the last few years. And he holds a high standard, and I appreciate that. I've talked a lot about, the process for selecting another adjutant general, and I'd like to address that a bit, because I think it's a flawed process in some respects. We're I believe, one of the last states to have a political election for adjutant general. And I think that it's demeaning, I believe, for those going through the process. And I'm not sure that we get all the information we should. I would advocate for a judicial nominating type approach. I sat on the, when I was in the Senate, I sat on the Judicial Nominating Board. We would take resumes, we would interview, we would check references, we would do background checks. We went through a long process to make sure that judges we were going to elevate and consider were of the highest standard. So I am asking the legislature to take a look. And we tried that in the last couple of years. General Cray was supportive of that. And I was told this morning, one of the senators is going to forward that bill. So we'll see whether it can be done in this process. But I'm going to continue to advocate that we change the process.
Why
Governor,
would
have you
anyone-
done any kind of independent have you or your administration done any kind of independent investigation of these allegations? Or are you simply relying upon the Guard's representations when you come to your conclusions?
Well, we were, as I stated the other day, we were made aware of some allegations in my first month in office. My general counsel took a look, went through an extensive process, talked with the person who sent the letter, as well as their attorneys, as well as the JAG, and went through a complete process, an intense process. I believe we were one of maybe the only officials that received the information that went through this. So after going through that, we were convinced that the process was being adhered to, that the person was had appeal rights and was being treated appropriately, as well as with the Inspector General. So I don't, we are not at this point in time advocating for any independent review. I've spoken to General Cray. I take him at his word. They're doing everything they can, and I'm convinced that all the procedures and protocols were adhered to.
But these stories raise many other allegations, obviously, other than the one that your office looked into years ago, right, or a couple years ago. You're saying you're not asking for any additional investigation, you're not doing anything other than take General Cray's word for it here?
Well, not just General Cray's word for it, but we had, again, some of the instances that were portrayed in the articles were part of the information we received 2 years ago. We went through an extensive review at that point and felt that every process was adhered to. So at this point in time, I see no reason to go through an independent review.
Which other issues came up during that review specifically?
In terms of some of the cases that were referenced. Not all of them were as in great detail as we've seen in the last recent articles of the last week, but there were some that came up.
So because some of those allegations were in the previous complaint that was filed, you feel there's no further need to explore the
Well,
latest
if
series?
more information comes up that leads me to believe that the processes and protocols weren't adhered to, we'll take another look.
But the information in that
At
article,
this point, I don't believe that we need to at this point.
the information in that article was not enough for you to trigger any sort of additional look?
No, I believe that all the processes were adhered to. I believe that they've gone through the victims and those who were the allegations were against were adjudicated in the right process.
You were satisfied with the process that went into dismissing Calvin, or that allowed Calvin Kemp to retire before the investigation into him was completed
Yeah,
and go on to a different parish?
And again, I may ask General Cray to answer some of the retirement questions, because some of that is with the Guard, some of it is with someone on active duty, and there is a difference, and I'm not sure that I can speak directly to that case.
Governor, how does your answer comport with the idea of more transparency?
I'm sorry,
How does your answer comport with the idea of more transparency?
how did my answer to what?
You all are talking about more transparency around some of the issues that have been brought up. And I'm just wondering if there's no external investigation of what happened, how you're gonna get there.
Well, I think you've done a pretty good job in providing the transparency and have brought a lot of these to light. But again, I was convinced, with my general counsel, having done her homework and going through this, that all the processes were adhered to, the protocols were adhered to. The appeal rights of those involved were adhered to. So I'm not sure that, I'm not convinced that anything was held back.
I'm confused here, you're saying, sorry, and if I can just interrupt, you're at the same time, sounds like complimenting BT Digger's reporting, saying that they've done a pretty good job of bringing this to light. At the same time, General Cray is saying that he vehemently disagrees with the way they portrayed this. I don't understand how to square those two.
Well, again, I'm saying, you know, the media has a role to play, and they brought a lot of things to light. At this point in time, General Cray is responding to some of the allegations, and I'm sure that in time, some of this material, as he can speak about it, will come forward.
Are you basically saying then, if Digger hadn't published this, that we wouldn't have found out about this?
Well, I'm not sure that you would have heard about some of it. I would have heard about some of it had Digger not written about it. So, yeah, I mean,
So
that's.
that loops back to the transparency.
Doesn't that indicate that maybe you should take a look? Because as good as the series did in shining a light on things, there might be more.
Well, again, I'm not convinced that there is any more, and I've spoken to General Cray, asked him pointedly about that. If any new information comes up that leads me to believe to something else, then we would go further. I know the legislature might have an interest in this as well, and will probably be at least asking the General Cray to come in to describe some of the issues that came forward.
General Cray, is this bar, this private bar, still operating that was described in the Digger piece?
The Afterburner Club, I
Yeah.
think it was, so, it was not accurately portrayed in the article. The establishment no longer exists on the Air National Guard base. It was never exclusive to any one group nor to any particular rank. It is, the building's undergoing renovations, and there's a plan to have a heritage room in the operations building that would display numerous artifacts, awards, certificates that all of the Vermont Air National Guard members have contributed to in earning. And that room, we're looking at the policies and procedures on how to enact that.
Did you
talked
socialize
quite a bit
there?
about the sexual harassment policies. Is there also a closer look being taken at alcohol consumption policies?
There has, and we can always make improvements to our policies. We have done a lot in that regard, and we only do that by exception to policy, and it's strictly adhered to.
General, did you socialize there at the Afterburner Club?
Did
Did you socialize there?
So I'm not aware that the room that was inaccurately described as Asbury Club was called that, but there was a place in the operations building when I was flying that had this similar memorabilia in it, and I was in there along with a lot of other members of the Vermont National Guard.
Can you accurately describe it for us?
The room?
Just,
Yeah.
the room, what happened there?
Right, so the room,
Not what it physically looks like,
Right, but-
what kind of activities took place there, because you're saying that the way it was described was inaccurate.
Sure, so, the room was located, and will be located in the operations building. That's where not only pilots, but all operational personnel that have to do with flying operations, are there. The room has, numerous artifacts and memorabilia, awards, that kind of thing. That's a place for, that we can display that kind of thing. It's also a room where people can go after missions, both pilots, maintenance officers, maintenance personnel, crew chiefs, those kind of thing. They can go there and debrief the mission. And that sort of camaraderie is extremely important to a fighter unit.
General
Was there
Cray,
drinking there? Was there drinking there, though? You're not, like, is that part inaccurate, the drinking at that room?
No, you could consume alcohol in the room.
And were there, like, kegs there from distributors and local distributors?
On a
or
case-by-case
kegs?
basis, there was alcohol after hours.
So what exactly was inaccurate about the description of this?
So what I am vehemently opposed to is the description of the culture that describes, or seems to describe a culture in which we have pilots and other personnel sort of, exclusively there, consuming alcohol, you know, during the duty hours and whatnot, and that it was closed to personnel of the base, which is completely inaccurate.
When did alcohol stop being served there? You mentioned it's no longer operating. When did
Right,
that?
the establishment is no longer there because the building is being renovated.
So when did that happen? When did that go?
We started about a year ago? About a year ago when the construction happened on the base.
And in the last month or so, was there any other place that members gathered for camaraderie and drinking?
The only other establishment on the base is the All Ranks Club, that is licensed with a bartender and serves alcohol after duty hours on drill weekends and on special occasions.
General, you mentioned the 2 steps. How important is it to restore any doubt that the public may have on the guard?
Well, it's extremely important that the public have trust and confidence in the Vermont National Guard. You know, I am extremely proud of the men and women who serve in today's National Guard, who would volunteer to sacrifice from their families and their civilian jobs and to put their very lives on the line for all of us. There is always room for improvement in what we do each and every day, and I strive to do that. I told the legislature in 2013 when I came in that I wanted to look hard at the culture of an inclusive culture for all members to join. Look, we need young men and women to continue to join the National Guard. Be very clear that we value everyone, we respect everyone, and when individuals step out of line and break the rules, then there is a process to handle that, and we will handle them accordingly.
Governor, in general, the basing of the F-35 here has been extremely controversial. Are you worried that this series, and how are you worried, if you are worried, that this series will impact that controversy over the F-35?
I'm not at all concerned. The F-35 will be based here next year. Look forward to seeing it here.
General, is there, we're talking about back to the club and the camaraderie and the occasional drinking. Are there any privileges or privacy awarded to pilots that is not available or common anyway to people of lower rank or different missions that might encourage or allow, I guess, aggressive sexual behavior to take place?
There are no special privileges for pilots around the club issue at all.
How about privacy? I mean, are they awarded, I guess, is there any difference between the Air Guard and the Army Guard in respect to how they are, how they join together after missions and have semi-private drinking and socialization, I guess?
Well, socialization comes in many forms, and I think after any mission, if you understand the National Guard at whole and Army or Air, doesn't matter, when they're doing a mission, an important part of that is the after-action report, the debrief, and it's certainly incredibly important to pilots as well as any other crew type of activity that would happen. But to associate it, to say that it's exclusive or private to pilots or them is inaccurate.
General Cray, in the middle of the publication of these articles, you announced that you would retire. What role did these articles play in your decision?
So, as I mentioned in the statement, I had been, and my civilian employer had been expecting me to return in March after my third term as Adjutant General. That had been known, including the governor, and so it is not a surprise nor unexpected.
That was known since when?
Well, I have been talking to my civilian employer for the last 2 years after, doing the last.
Why did your spokesperson tell VT Digger in August that wasn't the case?
The case that I wasn't retiring?
Saying that it wasn't being discussed, your retirement was not being discussed.
Well, it wasn't being discussed because I hadn't formulated a plan on how to roll that out out to the media, but I had certainly been talking to, the governor, legislators, my senior leadership team and whatnot, to fully expect that there would be a transition after my third term.
When did you first talk to the governor about the possibility of you leaving the role?
I'm gonna say it was probably 3 months ago that I learned that he wasn't going to run again for Adjutant General. And there's a difference between not running again and retiring. I think the retiring was something that I just learned this week. But I knew about that he wasn't going to run for Adjutant General again because of his employment.
So is the retirement decision then new?
No, I guess I just didn't communicate to the governor, because there's opportunity to, if you don't run for the Adjutant General, is there an opportunity to serve in some other capacity, in DC or something like that. But I had decided, and my employer knew, that I was gonna be returning for quite some time now.
Do you stand by the treatment and the way that Calvin Kemp's retirement happened that allowed him to leave without anything on his record about his interactions with Heather Fink, and then allowing him to move to another private parish?
I stand behind the process that Calvin Kemp went through, the investigation, the adjudication, the review inside and outside the Vermont National Guard, the appeal process, and the actions that were taken.
Do you think he did anything wrong?
Again, I stand by the process that went through and determined the outcome and the appropriate action that would be taken.
And do you worry about what he might have done after leaving the Guard? If you do believe that he did something wrong, that he might have done that again outside the Guard because there was no public information about what had happened? He went to work at a different church. They had no idea about what happened at the Guard, largely because it was an internal investigation handled internally, so there was no way for them to know.
So I absolutely understand the concern, and the fact that our actions were taken were administrative actions that, through the privacy protections that I had mentioned, we couldn't disclose. And how that affected community, I fully understand that, but that is outside of the purview of the Vermont National Guard.
Can you imagine policy changes that would allow that to be handled differently so that incidents of a sexual nature could somehow be made public so that that person wouldn't be hired and potentially risking future people?
As I've said, I think there's an opportunity in all of this to improve and make changes to policy, and that is something that we should look at, and at a national level, not just here in Vermont.
When will the results of the current ongoing internal investigation be made public and transparent?
I'm not aware of an internal investigation. Can you clarify what you're?
Well, the allegations refer to a series of incidents that were investigated, and I'm wondering if, how quickly the Guard plans to disclose these in the future. I mean, it shouldn't require Digger to pry them out of your offices. I think the public, I'm guessing here, would like to know when there are problems, when they happen. To what extent can you guarantee that that is gonna happen?
Well, I think if I understand your question, I think it gets at to the action step, the number one action step that we had talked about, which is to increase the transparency when, when things happen in our organization, that we communicate to our members that this continues to happen, that we need to continuously work on that culture, and then the disposition, to what level we can disclose that. As far as an investigation on all the incidences, each incident is handled on its own. That when we know about it, then there is due process, and we investigate each case individually.
And how much of those investigations can you disclose when they are adjudicated, after they're adjudicated?
I think it really depends on the case itself and what type of privacy information we're talking about.
Are there rules in place, though, that say, hey, this is public information, even if the names of the victims, say, are excluded?
It's a question for the JAG, I think, on what, as we review each one of those cases and what can be released and what cannot be released.
General, you'll be retiring soon. You talked about your disappointment in the tone of the articles. You've also talked about improvements that could be made at the Guard. But as the top officer, do you accept responsibility? Do you feel disappointment? Can you just sort of share your thoughts on being the leader of this institution as it goes through this?
Yeah, I'm incredibly passionate about the Vermont National Guard. As I said in my opening statement, I literally grew up in the Guard, right from UVM to the Guard, and I've been here for nearly 34 years. I care deeply about every member that makes a sacrifice to join and serve their country and serve this great state. And it is my responsibility as the leader of the National Guard to speak positively about the organization, encourage young men and women to continue to answer that call to serve. I'm incredibly proud of the men and women and the culture that we have created. You understand that we're not perfect, and I have been very transparent about the fact that we are not perfect and that we do make mistakes and that we can learn from them. But the men and women that are here serving today and that will serve tomorrow and into the future should know that the leadership values what they do each and every day, that values the fact that we need to create a safe working environment and we need to treat everyone with dignity and respect.
General Craig, can you explain your press office's decision to retaliate against VT Digger for doing its job? And Governor, can you tell us whether you agree with the way they handled that?
I don't see it as a retaliation, and Vermont Digger is here today and will be in the future.
Are you going to put them back on your press list and treat them the way that you treat every other news organization in the state?
It's already done.
Do you disagree? So can you explain the decision to pull them off? Was that authorized by you?
It was, and it was fully disclosed on what we were, and again, it was to not include them on our mailing list, and had to do with a decision that I made on what I thought was inappropriate action by one of their reporters calling directly a survivor, and I thought it was inappropriate. We've since taken a look at it and to provide that full transparency and realize, and I do realize, that the Vermont National Guard and the military at whole has a obligation to be completely transparent and to answer questions and to get our information out to the public, and we will continue to do so.
But you decided to punish this news organization for trying to get the story of somebody who allegedly experienced sexual
No, I don't characterize it as punishment in that regard. I say I characterize it as a decision to not include that. We still answered all of the questions that were asked of us in a timely manner.
But what was the goal? If you were not punishing them by taking that action, what were you trying to do?
I wanted to send a message that said that I did not agree with the tactic of having someone call a survivor and do harm to that individual.
Did that
Governor Scott,
survivor-
do you support that decision?
Well, I think you all know my feelings about keeping the press open. I think it's important. I think it's important for the process, important for our democracy. And as difficult as it is to face you week in and week out, I don't think I've ever excluded anyone. So I didn't agree with the decision. I think General Craig knows that at this point. I believe it should be an open process.
General Craig, did that survivor express that they were upset that they were contacted over the story?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
Do you regret, General, not sitting down with Digger earlier when they requested an interview?
I do not. The questions, we asked them to send us the questions because I knew that this could be multi-layered, and then I have a staff of subject matter experts that could more accurately get them the information that they needed.
Is
General,
that,
are you willing to release the results of the most recent climate survey with regard to the legislature so they have some idea of what morale is like among the ranks?
I think we have executive summaries of the climate surveys from the Vermont National Guard that we use to influence our testimony in our reporting, and we'll continue to use them for that purpose.
And has the climate changed in significant ways over the past 5 years since you've done things like creating this task force to change it?
I think it has. I think the fact that we are continuing as a society to talk about the issues that would hamper the full success of any one of our military members, and that the fact that we're all here today to talk about what I believe is a extremely important national societal issue that's going on, that we are all in the end talking about how to prevent this type of action and how to make society better, and in my case, how to make the Vermont National Guard better.
Will you be reporting sexual harassment incidents to the legislature in the future?
Sexual harassment incidents, I believe are included in our equal opportunity section of the report, but I will ask our folks if that's true, but I believe that they are included in our equal opportunity section of the report.
Is Christopher Caputo going to be flying F-35s?
At this time, he is planned on transitioning to the F-35, to my knowledge.
How many personnel work and are members of the Vermont National Guard?
There's about 2,700 or so, just under 3,000 Army National Guard and about 1,000 Air National Guard. And then there's about 130 Vermont Military Department state employees.
Does that include people who have retired but haven't been discharged?
That's a round number. I mean, I don't have specific numbers, but when I talk about the Vermont National Guard, I talk about nearly 3,000 Army, about 1,000 Air, and about 130
Those are all
state
active
employees.
members, not people like on the delayed discharge past or?
These are all members of the Guard.
When Thomas Jackman became commander, there was quite a bit of fanfare around it, showed up in media, et cetera. When he stepped down or was forced to step down and Patrick Guinea took his place, that was done much more quietly. Was that intentional?
Patrick Guiney's assumption of command at a time when the wing was very busy. A lot of transition going on, and so he became the wing commander. We did a ceremony in front of the wing, and we kept moving forward.
So that wasn't done because Thomas Jackman was sort of stepping down in some sense of disgrace.
It was not. Okay. One last question.
Yeah. Any further questions?
Governor, just one more time. There seems to be, again, significant differences between sort of how the Guard views some of these events, how they were reported based on, talking to a couple dozen Guard members. You don't have any interest in finding out for yourself sort of where the truth lies in these
Yeah,
matters?
I would say this. Since I came into office, there's been only one complaint about the Guard. That was that one incident in the first month. We have received none other since then. And that includes the last week or so. But having said that, if there is anyone out there that has a complaint and would like to register that and doesn't feel that they can through the Guard, they're welcome to call our office, contact our office, and we'll follow through.
What phone number should they call?
828-3333.